This lecture is on Chapter 16, which is titled JavaFX UI Controls and Multimedia. Now the JavaFX, if you guys have probably for JavaFX, if you guys probably noticed now, it provides many UI controls for developing comprehensive user interfaces. Additionally, JavaFX provides mechanisms to rapidly assemble UI controls with very minimum coding. By now, hopefully, you are able to appreciate the value provided by object-oriented programming. Without object-oriented programming, we wouldn't have JavaFX, which means you're developing UIs on your own, including all the functionality that we take for granted. For example, when we have a UI displayed and we hit the X in the upper right-hand corner, how that closes the program. Things like that we get for free because it's inherited from a base class. In this case, it's inherited from the application class. So as you can see, developing rich and complex user interfaces would be difficult to accomplish without using inheritance and coding principles that's grounded in polymorphism, encapsulation, and abstraction. Having said that, JavaFX does not do everything. It is better to consider JavaFX as a premium toolkit that provides high-quality implements to tackle any problem. It is your job as a programmer to know when to use which tool and how to use them. So for this lecture, we're going to primarily focus on the most frequently used UI controls. We're going to look at the label, button, checkbox, radio button, text field, text area, combo box, and list view controls, and just give you a really quick introduction on how to use those. Let's begin with the label class. That you probably will need to just a UI control to display area for short text, image, or node. Now this is where JavaFX differs from Alt and Swing. In Alt and Swing, a label could only display just text. You would have to use other combinations of other UI controls to get a label with an image on it. Now, so with the label, and we've used labels in our previous assignments for our labs, and you usually will put a label on your UI to provide description for other UI controls, for example, like a text field class, things of that nature. And if we wanted to create labels, here's just some different examples of how to do it. The first one is a empty label where we won't put any arguments inside our our new label when we instantiate it, which calls a no-arg constructor. If we do that, then more than likely that means somewhere else in code we are going to do empty label.setText method. We'll invoke that method and give it the text, because I don't see a purpose of having a label without any words on it on our UI. The other examples, as you can see on the screen, well, we create another label, text for label, for example, and then we can change the color of the text by using the set text fill method. So invoking that method will change the color for the text. And then the third way is how we can put a graphic onto our label. In this case, we call the new label, and then inside the parentheses, we give it the string that's going to display the string that we want. And our second parameter becomes the graphic. In this case, I'm creating a circle as the graphic. And then now that I have a text and a graphic, I want to control where I place that media. And in that case, I will call the set content display, and that will place the media or the graphic in a particular location, a specified location, relative to the text. So in this case, I'm using the parameter content display dot right, which means I'm placing the circle to the right of the text. The next class is the button class, and we've used button classes before. It's a UI control that triggers an action event when it's clicked. And here's a couple of examples of how to do that. The first one is something we've already worked with, where we created a button, and then we just added we invoke the set on action method. We've talked about how to create event listeners. There's 4 different ways. to do that. That's just one way we've done it in this slide. And the next example, creating a button, is similar to the last example in the label slide. I'm creating a button with a graphic next to it. So this is, I would do it in the same way. In this case, I'm adding an image view next to my button. There are other UI controls, and these UI controls will then can be used to prompt the user to make a selection. In the first two cases, the label, well, look at the label. The UI can't really do anything with the label other than read the label. And then with a button, the user can only really click a button. But we want the user to make a selection. We need different controls for that. And there are two ways of doing it. The first way is a checkbox. And here's just ways to set that up. We call the checkbox class. And then with the checkbox object, we can set what we want to be selected. And then we can also figure out which one is selected later on in code. And then with radio buttons, with the radio buttons, I can do it. I can create radio buttons in a similar fashion how I create a checkbox. Now, the difference between a radio button and a checkbox is a checkbox. We'll use a series of checkboxes if we want the user to have an opportunity to make multiple selections. For a radio button, that means we usually only want the user to make one selection. And in radio button cases, you have to think of it as in terms of mutually exclusive. I have two options which are mutually exclusive, or a series of options, but they're all mutually exclusive, and the user has to choose one. So in this particular case, I may be asking a student who attends Kennesaw State, which campus does he or she live close to, and they only have one option that they can choose from, Kennesaw or Marietta. Now, as you guys see, if I just have this text here and I implement this in my code, right now, both buttons can be selected or both buttons can be unselected. What I need to do is add additional functionality to make this a mutual exclusive thing, and I do that through the toggle group class. So I create a toggle group, and then I add the group to each button. And what I'm saying is, you belong to this group, and this group can only have one option that would be selected. And I know in the book you can use the set action method to create your action listener, but in most cases I think that's a bad UI functionality. In most cases, what you would do, you would have another button like a go or submit or confirm or something like that, and on that action, when that button is clicked, you then go ahead and check the status of your checkboxes and radio buttons. Now let's look at text field and text area. We've already worked with these in great detail, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. The methods that I find to be more useful for these two given components would be the set editable to make it. I think it's true by default, and if you don't want the user to edit it, then you have to set it to false. The set text that gives the text field, the text area, a string to display to the user, and then the get text, we want to retrieve what's in that string. And then for the text area, because the text area differs from a text field in the sense that the text area control has multiple lines to it, we may want to set the wrap text to be true or false. In one case, that means if we have a word and it gets to the end of the line, it splits it at that character and moves the remaining letters to the next line. And then in the other case, it moves the entire word to the bottom of the line or to the next line. And then also, because we're dealing with, in the text area, we're dealing with multiple lines, there may be an occasion where we need to add a scroll pane because we have so much text that not all the text can be viewed. So we need to give the user the opportunity to scroll and find all the text. And I think this is the last slide, and we'll conclude this lecture. It's a combo box and a list view. They're just drop-down controls. A combo box allows the user to only make one value, single value, where a list view will allow the user to make multiple values. So on the left, you see how to use a combo box, where we create a combo box and we can add items to it. And then we can set the value of the item that we want to be displayed when the UI is loaded and fired. And then, of course, inside the an action listener, we want to get the value that got selected. On the right side is a list view, and it's pretty similar to setting up a combo box. The methods we invoked are different. So you can see we create a list view object, and then if we want to give the user the opportunity to make multiple selections, we have to invoke the get selection mode .set selection mode and give it the multiple parameter. And then later on inside an action listener, if we want to get the value of what got selected, then we use the method as you see below.